This hearing on the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry, entitled "To Review USDA Farm Bill Conservation Programs," will come to order. And I will begin with my opening statement. I'm pleased to be here today for our first Conservation and Forestry Subcommittee hearing, and I'm pleased to hold this on the 157th birthday of the USDA, which was founded in 1862 by President Lincoln, so happy birthday to the USDA. I look forward to working with Ranking Member Doug LaMalfa, and I thank him for his leadership on the subcommittee and for the productive conversations and discussions we've already had regarding our shared priority. I also want to thank each member for being a part of the subcommittee, and I look forward to working with each of you. Today, this subcommittee will be addressing USDA Farm Bill conservation programs. We'll be discussing the conservation programs under the respective authorities of the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the Farm Service Agency, as well as the changes that the 2018 Farm Bill made to some of these programs. To that end, I would like to thank our witnesses for being here today, and I would like to thank our witnesses for taking part in this discussion. I represent a diverse swath of Central Virginia, from the Richmond suburbs to the fields of Nottoway County in the south to the rural communities of Culpeper County in the north. I have heard from producers in my district who make use of the USDA's conservation programs such as EQIP and CRP, particularly now with net farm income at just half of its 2013 levels. These voluntary programs that provide support to farmers while at the same time protecting our natural resources are absolutely critical. The role of voluntary conservation programs in our country's history provides additional context as to why they're necessary today. Federal conservation assistance began during the Depression when the Great Plains experienced severe multi-year droughts leading to soil erosion, dust storms, farm abandonments, and mass migration, the Dust Bowl. In response, Congress established the Soil Conservation Service, which began advancing on-the-ground conservation practices to reduce soil erosion and promote productive fields and healthy landscapes. Today, the National Resource Conservation Service and the Farm Service Agency at USDA administer more than a dozen programs and subprograms to address natural resource concerns, and through voluntary incentive-based approach, USDA provides private landowners and operators with the technical and financial assistance they need to thrive, remain sustainable, and achieve profitability. This work is vital. More than 70% of land in the United States is held by private landowners, so the decisions they make have deep and lasting implications for Americans, both on and off the farm. Much like the Dust Bowl era, the case for agricultural resiliency and sustainability applies today. According to National Climate Assessment, climatic disruptions to agricultural production over the past 40 years have been linked to changes in crop yield and quality. Extreme weather events, such as historic snowfall and flooding in the Midwest, destructive hurricanes across the Southeast, and devastating wildfires in the West lend urgency to conservation efforts. Throughout this hearing, I am interested in learning more about the suite of conservation programs available to producers through USDA. I'm interested in learning more about the outreach strategies that recruit producers and encourage them to adopt new practices. And I'm also eager to hear about the new authorities afforded by the 2018 Farm Bill and the prospects they hold in accelerating conservation efforts on the ground. With that, I would like to recognize and thank Ranking Member Doug LaMalfa, the distinguished gentleman from California, for 5 minutes.
Good to see you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for convening this hearing today, and it's also been a pleasure to work with you so far leading up to this point. I know we're going to have a great relationship as we accomplish a lot this session on these key issues we're going to deal with conservation and timber as well. So I'm obviously very geared towards what we got going on in my own district with that, but also all across the country with our management of our assets and the best conservation and use of them long term. So good morning, and again, thank you for having this hearing on the USDA Farm Bill conservation programs. Over the past 35 years, Congress has acknowledged that voluntary conservation works well, leading to significant investments in various conservation initiatives. In recent farm bills, we've expanded our financial commitment for important initiatives like the CRP, Conservation Reserve Program, and EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, both very key in my own district in Northern California. We also created new tools like the CSP, Conservation Security Program, which expands the use of on-farm conservation practices, and the RCPP with the Regional Conservation Partnership Program that leverages federal funding with matching assistance from partners in the private sector. Over the past 5 years, RCPP has been successfully utilized in the Sacramento Valley as NRCS and other partners have worked with rice producers to create habitat for waterfowl, something we've done on our own farm at home to great effect. The 2018 Farm Bill has contained new approaches to funding and delivering conservation programs. The House Ag Committee worked hard to protect mandatory funding and to strengthen the working lands and infrastructure programs. A few of the highlights include CSP was reformed to allow more flexibility in program delivery. EQIP funding was significantly increased and will reach over $2 billion per year by 2023, allowing for expanded authority to address water savings and irrigation projects and to address drought in the West. CIP payments were established to allow for scalable adoption and maintenance of conservation practices that will be tailored to address locally identified resource concerns. Very important. RCPP, which I previously mentioned, was provided its own funding allocation, allowing the program to operate on its own, along with streamlined delivery for NRCS. The Ag Conservation Easement Program, which protects our farmlands, grasslands, and wetlands, received a significant increase as well. The CRP acreage cap was increased and meaningful reforms were implemented to prevent the program from competing against beginning farmers or other producers wanting to access land. Finally, the 2018 Farm Bill made significant investments in infrastructure, including our Watershed Operations Program that will provide certainty to project sponsors across the country. The funding and reforms made to these programs, along with the new authorities provided to address active management of national forests, make this the strongest farm bill ever for Western states as well. While our focus today is on the conservation programs administered by USDA, the Farm Bill also did many great things to assist private forest owners as well as state and national forests. However, many needed authorities to streamline active management of national forests were left out. If we do not address the declining health of our largest carbon sink, many of our conservation gains will be wiped away with the destruction of watersheds and wildlife habitat, along with the loss of personal property and life, air quality, the whole shoot and match. We need to do better. Again, thank you, Chair Spanberger, for calling today's hearing. I look forward to working with you in this Congress. The subcommittee has a lot of important work to do ahead of it as we review the implementation of key conservation and forest practices. I would also like to thank our witnesses today, Chief Lohr and Administrator Fordyce, for joining us today. We know both of you are very busy with Farm Bill implementation, always a challenge, never fast enough for some folks, but we know you're busting it, trying to get it going, keep it going. So thanks for making time to be with us, and I appreciate what you do to help our producers on the ground as well. So I'll yield back. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so the witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure there is ample time for questions. I would like to welcome our witnesses today. Thank you for being here. Today we will hear from Mathew Lohr, Chief of the Natural Resources and Conservation Service. As Chief, Mr. Lohr provides leadership for NRCS and its mission to support America's farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners in their conservation efforts. Mr. Lohr is a fellow Virginian and a fifth-generation farmer. Prior to NRCS, Mr. Lohr served as Virginia's Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services from 2010 to 2013, and in the Virginia House of Delegates from 2006 to 2010. Since 2017, he has farmed full-time on his family's operation, which includes poultry, beef cattle, row crops, and sweet corn. We will also hear from Richard Fordyce, Administrator of the Farm Service Agency. Mr. Fordyce, our second witness, Mr. Richard Fordyce, Administrator of the Farm Service Agency. As Administrator, he provides leadership for FSA and its mission to support agricultural production across America through a network of over 2,100 county and 50 state offices. Mr. Fordyce is a fourth-generation farmer from Bethany, Missouri, and previously served as the state's Executive Director for FSA in Missouri and as Director of the Missouri Department of Agriculture from 2013 to 2017. I thank you both for your service, and I look forward to your testimony. Chief Lohr, please begin when you're ready.
Well, good morning, Chairwoman Spanberger, Ranking Member LaMalfa, and members of the subcommittee, and thank you so much for this opportunity for Richard and I to testify before you today to discuss the United States Department of Agriculture's conservation programs. And happy birthday, USA. Appreciate you mentioning that. My name is Mathew, and I have the distinct honor of serving as the 16th Chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or more commonly known as NRCS. I started this position last December as a fifth-generation farmer in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, and my earliest memories as a child were working alongside my father and my grandfather on our family farm. Fortunately for me, they model a love and appreciation of our natural resources that continues with me today. I know firsthand the importance of our motto, helping people help the land. Under the leadership and guidance of Secretary Perdue, the Farm Production and Conservation, or FPAC mission area was recently established with a focus on domestic agricultural issues. Led by Undersecretary Bill Northey, the FPAC mission area consists of NRCS, the Farm Service Agency, and the Risk Management Agency. The USDA mission area serves as the focal point for our nation's farmers, ranchers, and stewards of private forest lands. Together, the agencies work to support each other as we deliver our programs to best serve our customers. As an agency within the FPAC leadership structure, NRCS is focused on delivering conservation programs and technical assistance through a locally led process where local input drives natural resources priorities. We have over 2,000 offices and communities nationwide with more than 9,000 employees who provide information, tools, and a delivery system to assist producers with conserving, maintaining, and enhancing their natural resources. NRCS works in partnership with private landowners, communities, local governments, and other stakeholders to promote a sustainable usage while safeguarding the nation's private working lands. Our conservation work revolves around two core functions: technical assistance and financial resources. Through our conservation operations, we provide technical assistance that's aimed at helping people conserve, maintain, and improve their natural resources. These operations support our critical infrastructure that enables our staff to deliver quality conservation planning, assist communities and producers with with water supply forecasting, and assist the nation with becoming more resilient against climate change. Our web soil survey is broadly used by the agriculture sector as well as the general public. Each day, NRCS proudly invests roughly $8 million in conservation efforts, but that number is multiplied many times over through our great partnerships that we have and agreements across the country. We also partner with fellow agencies within USDA, like the Farm Service Agency and the U.S. Forest Service. Our Working Lands program includes the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. We also offer farmland and wetland protection through the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, or ACEP, and features of each of these programs are available through our Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP. Lots of acronyms to keep straight. Since the 2018 Farm Bill has become law, NRCS has worked to implement ACEP, CSP, and EQIP in 2019 while developing the rules and regulations for the fiscal year 2020 enrollment. Moving forward in 2019, we plan to do much more with our new authorizations. Today, in fact, I'm pleased to share that the Secretary has announced a notice of funding availability for up to $25 million for our Conservation Innovation Grants, or SIG, for an on-farm conservation innovation trials. This announcement will include a soil health demonstration trial component, and we'll be accepting proposals through July 15 of this year. As a farmer, I can attest to the fact that good conservation makes good financial sense for agriculture production. Through NRCS's services, farms are improved, efficiencies are established, and producers enhance production in concert with natural resources protection. NRCS's conservation efforts also extend to times of natural disaster, assisting both producers and communities in their greatest times of need. Through our programs like EWP and EQIP, we have assisted in hurricane recovery efforts in Puerto Rico, flooding across the heartland, and damaging wildfires throughout the West. Some of my greatest moments as chief have occurred around kitchen tables and pickup trucks where I've heard stories from our customers face to face. Many of them have shared personal stories about how our efforts at NRCS have literally saved their farming operations. It's an honor to be able to share with you today and talk about the Farm Bill programs and the efforts that we are making to improve the environment, preserve our natural resources, and ensure the viability for agriculture and forestry for many generations to come. Thank you again for the invitation, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Chief Lohr. We appreciate your comments. Administrator Fordyce, please, when you're ready.
Chairwoman Spanberger, Ranking Member LaMalfa, and distinguished members of the committee, I am honored to be with you this morning. This is the first opportunity that I've had to be before the subcommittee or the committee in general since being appointed administrator last May. Thank you for your support of our vital farm programs and the excellent farm bill that allows us to help farmers and ranchers promote, build, and sustain family farms. The Farm Service Agency serves America's farmers, ranchers, and agricultural producers through the delivery of effective, efficient agricultural programs. The agency offers farmers a strong safety net through the administration of farm commodity and disaster programs, while conserving natural resources and providing credit to agricultural producers who are unable to receive private commercial credit. Obviously, I'm very proud of the work the Farm Service Agency does and the services they provide to our agricultural producers. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the nearly 10,000 folks that work on behalf of Farm Service Agency across this country in more than 2,100 county offices. And as I travel the country and visit with them, hearing their stories, understanding their passion for agriculture, their understanding for agriculture, a lot of times they refer to the farmers that they serve in their local communities as their farmers. Agriculture is in my blood. I'm a fourth-generation Missouri farm boy. My son is a fifth-generation farmer on our farm. So I know the importance of how our work and NRCS's work, and I know the policies and programs we implement not only affect my farm, but my neighbors and our communities as well. So I take this job and this role very seriously. One of USDA's largest conservation programs is the Conservation Reserve Program. It's a complex program that provides a variety of benefits. It's come a long way since its inception in 1985 and continues to evolve even today, including more partnerships like those under the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. In some parts of the country, marginal, highly erodible lands that are not ideal for agricultural production, it's better for the long-term health of the soil to keep them covered with grass or trees year-round. And in more productive fields, conservation buffers like riparian buffers, grassed waterways, and contour grass strips are often needed to prevent sediment and nutrients from polluting water bodies. In exchange for cost share and rental payments, farmers remove environmentally sensitive land from production and plant resource-conserving land cover to protect soil, water, and create wildlife habitat. The program recognizes that benefits from a farmer placing environmentally sensitive cropland into conservation uses are consumed not just by the farm, but by other people. CRP can spur hunting, fishing, recreation, tourism, and other economic activity across rural America. I have some news for today. I'm happy to share that the Secretary just announced that beginning June 3rd, we will reopen CRP continuous sign-up and accept requests for extensions of expiring CRP contracts. Additionally, our Emergency Conservation Program, or ECP, and the Emergency Forest Restoration Program, EFRP, continue to provide critical funding for rehabilitation to farmers and ranchers across the nation after a disaster. Within the last year alone, we have seen fires across the western states and our prairies, hurricanes pummel the southeast, extreme drought in the Texas Panhandle, and last month, historic snowfall and flooding across the northern plains and the Midwest. Even with the best planning, the impacts of these disasters will take years in many cases for a full recovery. Our conservation programs are voluntary, and the fact that our main program, CRP, covers over 22 million acres, and the additional millions of acres enrolled in NRCS programs shows how farmers are naturally good stewards of the land. For many, these lands are their livelihoods, their history, and their legacy. They want to leave the land better than they found it and pass it down to future generations, and our conservation programs and services that we provide help them do just that. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you both for your testimony. Members will be recognized for questioning in order of seniority for members who were here at the start of the hearing, and after that, members will be recognized in order of arrival. I would like to begin by recognizing Chairman Peterson of Minnesota.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fordyce, we found out yesterday afternoon, and you apparently have announced at 10 o'clock this morning, that you're going to open up the continuous using the existing regulations. So how do you think you have the authority to do that? And I just want you to know that if you do, I'm going to stop it somehow or another. You know, this program has been hijacked by the continuous stuff and the CREP stuff, which is, you know, we're going to have some exposure of what's been going on here, but I'm tired of it. You know, and so you're delaying the general sign-up to December for some reason because you have to do regs. You know, why don't you have to do regs on the continuous? You know, what rationale are you using down there?
Well, Mr. Chairman, thanks for the question. It's good to see you. My response to that would be after thorough analysis, FSA has determined that CRP continuous and CREP signups may be opened under limited circumstances prior to publication of the regulation. FSA is also working to ensure, subsequent to the updating of rental rates and publication of the CRP regulation, a general signup will be held in December of 2019. The Secretary and I are committed to meeting this timeline within the law.
So why, if you can do it for continuous, why can't you do it for general? What is the rationale?
Well, I would say that we are continuing to go through those decisions on the general sign-up, the rental rate piece, some of the other things that that don't necessarily enter into those continuous.
Well, I mean, you know, did you guys not get the message out of the Farm Bill? You know, the continuous, the sign-up has been $134 an acre. The general is $52. You know, so what you're going to end up doing here is you're going to create a situation where farmers are going to go out there and do everything they can to get it when they find out about these new rental rates to get into the continuous, because they're going to get 3 times as much as they would get if they get in the general. And that's just going to suck more acres up into the continuous that are not going to be available for the general. You know, now maybe some of this stuff does some good in terms of water quality and so forth, but it does almost zero good for wildlife. You know, these small strips are not doing anything for wildlife. The only thing it does are big tract CRP, which is what you get out of the general. And one of the reasons we've had trouble around the country is because we've eroded the general CRP and gone to continuous. So I'm serious. I mean, I don't know what we can do to stop you. If I have to sue you, I will. You know, this is not right. And if you can do continuous without regulations, then you can do general without regulations. You know, and I don't think farmers have, at this point, understand what's going to come under the new rules. But they'll find out. You know, they're always smarter than we are. And you're going to create a situation here. So I don't know. The statement, answer you gave me is not satisfactory to me. You know, and maybe you need to have the secretary call me or somebody, but I do not buy what you're saying, and I don't think you have to do this. So, message delivered. And, you know, also some of this easement stuff that you guys have been doing, and it's not some of this stuff was done before you got there. But, you know, they're adding easements onto these continuous signups and CREPs, you know, that are just out of line. And we're going to be doing a hearing on this, too, in the full committee as soon as we get our all the facts on the table. So I just want you to know I'm watching you. One other thing, it says in here you're also going to delay the sign-up of the GRP for some reason. And I don't know what that is for, but, you know, that we've doubled the size of that program, and that's something that would be available to a lot of people. I don't see any reason why that should be delayed either if you're going to be able to do this with the continuous. So I think I just want you to take this message back, and if you guys don't correct this, I'm going to figure out what we can do here to change it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After hearing from the chairman, I'm going to resume calling on my colleagues back into the order of questioning, and I'll begin with recognizing myself for 5 minutes. The 2018 Farm Bill made a number of important changes to the Title II conservation programs. Chief Lohr and Administrator Fordyce, can you both start off by providing us with an update on the implementation of the Farm Bill conservation programs? In particular, I would like to know, when do you expect the first and last rules to be published?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for your question and again for having this hearing today. So you're right, Congress was extremely generous in proving their commitment to conservation with the funding that was delivered through the programs, and we certainly thank you for that. We have started working the day after that the Farm Bill was signed into law in late December to create the rules and regulations for the Farm Bill, and as you know, it's quite a lengthy process. Literally the next day we began assembling our teams, our review teams, and throughout January up until now, they have been working diligently to go through the entire process. We're making great progress. I think we're definitely on track. Our goal is to have these rules, the interim rules, formulated by the first quarter of the new fiscal year. So I think we're on track to make that happen. Of course, as you know, the current Farm Bill programs, our farmers haven't had any gap in service because based on the extension from the 2014 Farm Bill, they have been able to continue as normal this year. So the rules that we're writing will take effect for 2020. So 2019, everything runs as before. So just a quick update on CSP. We had our deadline that closed on May 10th, our sign up. So farmers were able to sign up for CSP contracts, and some changes that the Farm Bill made to CSP. It shifted from, instead of an acres cap, to a dollar cap, and approximately $700 million a year next year will be for CSP. There's also a new component called CSP grassland, which there's some talk about. We're working with FSA to take land that's been not cropped for the last 9 years. It's not eligible for ARC PLC payments. They can enroll it in a CSP grassland program and be paid $18 a year. So there'll be more details about that program coming up later. EQIP, kind of our flagship program again, as it was said earlier, increased funding support up to $2 billion by the end of the Farm Bill in 5 years. Some of the priorities we're working on is how we can serve better the historically underserved populations by approving advance payments of 50% before the practices begin. We're in the process of reviewing those conservation practice standards, which should take place later this year.
Great. And Chief Lohr, if I could just thank you very much for some of those details. But getting back to the dates for the rules to be published, do you have a specific time frame? You said by the first quarter. And so my question is, many of the programs are allowed to continue operating under the existing rules until the end of FY 2019. So do you all have plans in place, or what are the contingencies available if the relevant rules are not done when the fiscal year ends in September?
Sure. It's certainly our goal to work towards making that happen. We hate to put ourselves in a box and say it will be done by October 1, but that's certainly our goal, and we're working hard to make that happen.
Okay. Well, certainly from a committee perspective or subcommittee perspective, I'd like to make sure that we stay apprised of the timing for those rules and when they will be published, so we know the impact on those producers who rely on those vital programs. Chief Lohr, as you know, as a fellow Virginian, parts of Virginia are on the Chesapeake Bay watershed. I know your farm is as well. The Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP, brings conservation partners and USDA to the same table to support farmers and ranchers as they address shared natural resource concerns. RCPP programs like the Farm Stewardship Project in my district support increasing the use of cover crops and reduced tillage. Unfortunately, since RCPP started in 2014, the Chesapeake Bay watershed has seen reductions in NRCS funds supporting critical in-the-field conservation work. How will the Farm Bill changes enable us to build new successful RCPP partnerships in the Chesapeake Bay watershed?
Well, that's a great question, and RCPP actually is one of my favorite programs that we administer here because it is a collaborative effort of bringing various partners and stakeholders together. So the changes very quickly in RCPP, it's gone to a national dedicated funding of $300 million a year. The money's going to be half divided between state RCP projects, and the other half is going to be in those targeted areas, which the Chesapeake Bay watershed is one of them. So there are opportunities available. Like I said, $150 million will be spread out across those targeted areas, and it's a ranking process. So it certainly encourage the partners that are located within the Chesapeake Bay to put their proposals together. We'll be announcing sign-up deadlines later in the year. But I agree, and certainly being a farmer within the Bay watershed, it's important that we can have these great programs in action, taking effect to better improve the quality of the water in the Bay.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Ranking Member LaMalfa from California.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chief Lore, in my district, in addition to the federal land, there's many thousands of acres of family-owned forests that are, as we see, at high risk of catastrophic wildfire year after year. For many landowners, they want to do the right thing and treat their land, but at over $2,000 an acre is out of reach under some types of conventional thinking. How is NRCS able to support these family forest owners that have this challenge? And how many forest owners have you had a chance to work with? And on how many acres so far in California have you had a chance to implement?
Well, certainly appreciate the question, and you're right. The wildfires across the West and especially in California have truly been devastating, both on a public scale and a private land scale as well. I would say, first of all, our EQIP program that I mentioned earlier, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, kind of works two ways. Forest landowners, before a disaster, can certainly put conservation practices on their forest lands through EQIP, whether it be conservation plans or looking at forest management practices or doing prescribed burns. There are EQIP dollars that are available for farmers that they can do certainly before a disaster, but then once a disaster happens, EQIP can also be used again. Although it's not intended to be a disaster relief program, there are funds available through EQIP that help in times of disasters as well. And so certainly, again, being able to look at how do you remove the burned timber, replanting trees or improving soil erosion that takes place after these wildfires, there are EQIP cost share dollars available to landowners who are facing that situation. So certainly would encourage your farmers to reach out to one of our local NRCS offices. I don't have an actual number of acres that have been affected in California that have actually worked through our NRCS offices. I'll be
Right, I
happy
don't expect you have maybe an exact number today. Do you feel like it's getting to the ground? Are people taking advantage of it in significant,
Yes, sir.
effect? Yeah.
I do know that there are EQIP programs or projects that are in place. And I would certainly, I don't know if you've met our state conservationist, Carlos Suarez. If not, I think it would be a great opportunity to make that connection for you as he oversees all of NRCS in the state of California. But yes, as far as digging into making sure that the farmers and the forest landowners in that area are aware, certainly the staff in those areas know that when these situations happen, they do their best to reach out to the landowners to make sure they know their services are available and working through our partners as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And for both of you, Administrator Fordyce as well, oftentimes we have environmental groups, others that point towards regulations as the only way to achieve conservation results. And seeing in my own backyard, my own district, we've seen a lot of great work done along with NRCS and FSA that has made improvements on an ESA recovery for species, wetlands and streams and many other things program. I'm in the rice industry, but others conserving water, fish screens. So can you give me your opinion on how you think the voluntary conservation would actually have a better track record than the regulatory hammer that so many folks are worried about? Because I see a lot of volunteerism on there, people doing things on their own to provide fish passage and fish safety and fish screening, a lot of other things. So please.
Well, that's a great question, and something I know that the chief and I, in our current roles and actually in our previous roles, talked a lot about, and that's that concept of voluntary conservation, and I do believe that we will gain far more benefits through a voluntary conservation approach as opposed to a regulatory approach. I think that agriculture in general for decades have been some of the most fervent conservationists from a voluntary perspective, and I mentioned it in my opening testimony that that farms, these lands are a legacy, they're a history in these families, and they want to improve them and make them better than they were when they first took them over. And so I do believe the concept of voluntary conservation will get us more advancements and more successes than taking a regulatory route.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, a little time left. The issue with finding markets for wood coming off of forests here, whether it's post-wildfire, with salvage, what is NRCS able to do to help make more markets and take more advantage of biomass? I'm going to have to let you think about that one. Maybe we'll get a second round. Thank you.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you both for your testimony this morning. Mr. Fordyce, the amount of land owned by African Americans has plunged over the past century from about 15 million acres now down to about 2 million. And if you may or may not be aware that 40% of that land is air property and has been left out of this process for some time. However, in the 2018 Farm Bill, there is language that allows them to participate. It enables them to qualify to get a farm number so that they can participate in the programs. What specific outreach or strategies have you used to let these farmers know that they are now qualified, and when did you start it, or if you haven't, when are you going to start it?
Well, thank you for the question, and you do bring up a very important point that since I've been there almost a year, that topic has come up in my visits across the country. So very much appreciate the language in the Farm Bill that will help us address that as well. I know that we're talking through the process as to how we'll implement it. From an outreach perspective, we have a very robust outreach program. We have an outreach coordinator at headquarters here in Washington, and she has a few staff here in Washington, but we have outreach coordinators, public affairs and outreach coordinators.
I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to know what it is you're doing to do the outreach.
So when? We are in the process of doing that outreach as we speak.
Thank you very much. So you are contacting these farmers with the air property, you know who they are, and you are making contact with them?
That I can't answer. I don't know the specific mechanism by which we are doing that.
Could you get back to me and let me know?
Yes, ma'am, I will, yes.
Thank you so much. I live in the Great Lakes. I live in the state of Ohio. Water quality is a major concern for us as we get our drinking water from Lake Erie. We have had problems in the past with nitrogen and phosphorus runoff, which has led to toxic algae blooms, which I'm sure you are aware. I was very excited about the fact that in the Farm Bill, we did include provisions that provide farmers and ranchers with additional incentives to address and improve water quality. Can you both just briefly touch on the programs that are available to do this, and if you think that they are being successful or will be successful? Included in that, if you could talk just briefly about the source water protection provisions in the bill and the Clear 30 program.
So I'll take the first stab at that, Congresswoman. The Undersecretary and I had traveled last summer to Michigan and Ohio in the Western Lake Erie Basin area to look at the CREP program, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, and the adoption of producers there. It's got a high adoption rate. A lot of producers are participating. I met with some other community members in that Western Lake Erie region, and while it's probably a little too early to tell what kind of gains we're getting from doing that, we know that they're positive gains. A little hard to measure at this point, but certainly a popular program, and is working toward reducing sediment and nutrients that are ultimately in that watershed.
Thank you. Mr. Lohr.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'll be brief because NRCS has many programs that really tackle this problem. First of all, it was mentioned RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, one of our most successful projects because of the number of partners that it brings in addressing large-scale watershed areas like this. Within RCPP, farmers then are able to participate with EQIP contracts that allow them to focus on specific water quality issues, whether it be stream fencing to keep livestock out of streams, whether it be working on cover crops to make sure that the soil stays in place to reduce sediment runoff, different types of tillage practices, going to a no-till again, which reduces runoff. So RCPP is one of those programs that, again, it multiplies the dollars 3 or 4 times with lots of partners. I mentioned EQIP. There are 169 practices that we have within the EQIP program. Many of those focus on water quality. They give farmers, again, specific cost share opportunities to make sure that they are protecting the resources, again, keeping the water as pure as possible. Conservation easements are, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
thank you. I just want you to be aware that we are watching because it is an important issue for us.
Thank you.
And I would close with this, Madam Chair, as the chairman of the full committee has said, we just expect for you all to uphold the letter and the spirit of the law. We just passed a farm bill, and certainly we would appreciate if you would not ignore our will, the will of Congress, for your own. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Maine for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to you and the ranking member for holding this hearing today, and to both of you being in front of us. And thank you both for the work that you're taking on. Welcome to your relatively new jobs. The programs that you administer and the work that you do is critically important in my state of Maine. I'm very proud to represent Maine, where we've had somewhat of a renaissance of farming in our state after losing some of our ground. People are coming back. We have a lot more young farmers in farming today. We have land that's coming under cultivation, families finding new ways to preserve their farm, and a lot of people taking advantage of new markets, and much of it is because of the programs that you administer and their ability to access them. So thank you so much for that. I'm really interested in the intersection of climate change and agriculture, and I think with this resurgence of interest and a lot of things being written about climate change, sometimes the first thing we go after is the farmers. And while there are practices that need to change in agriculture, I think people often don't understand that soils have the capacity to store a tremendous amount of carbon, as well as the plants that we're growing. And farmers really need to be our partners in climate solutions, and through the programs you administer, you're already promoting many of the very things that we need farmers to do more of. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about voluntary programs like EQIP and how they're incentivizing farmers to do this, and how we can be ramping up some of those soil health practices, and how you're thinking about it going into the future. Let me just throw in my follow-up on there, and it's the follow-ups. I'd love to hear from you both, but a little bit for you, Mr. Lohr. In order for farmers to be in a position to participate in some of the carbon markets that we anticipate they could be a part of, we're going to need some verified ways to recognize what they do. And I'm glad to hear you talking this morning about the soil health demonstration trial, because that's a critical part of it. But if you want to dig in a little bit deeper about some of the ways we can recognize and administer and the role that USDA might play in that. So go to it.
All right, thank you very much for your question, and I appreciate you recognizing the efforts that farmers in a positive way are doing to help mitigate climate change, because you're right, there's a lot of the things that we do already as conservationists have a positive impact towards mitigating climate change, making sure that we keep the ground covered with cover crops, making sure that there's grass on the ground, that our forests are healthy. A healthy soil reduces erosion in times of disaster. So, as you said, the practices that our farmers are already engaging in, especially through EQIP and those conservation practices, are going a long way already towards being able to mitigate climate change and sequester the carbon that's in the air. We have about 25 plant material centers across the country that are administered by NRCS staff, and these are many research areas as well, where they're able to see which cover crops are the most effective, constantly looking at practices that can be adapted by our farmers across the country, again, to mitigate that climate change. And you're right, with the SIG grants, there have been trials before that have been done to focus on the trading of carbon credits. That's the point of SIG. It's innovative, it's new ideas, and these on-farm trials, these demonstrations, again, with the soil health component, will go a long way towards looking at creating new practices that can be replicated, again, towards tackling this issue.
I think the chief answered that question very well from a farmer perspective, from NRCS's perspective, from FSA's perspective. I think that if you look at the number of acres of CRP that are enrolled, 22.5 million acres, just in 2017 alone, CRP reduced carbon emissions of carbon dioxide by an estimated 34 million metric tons. It is the largest carbon sequester program of any federal program. So certainly, I think that's important. I might just add, from a personal perspective, on our farm, we use cover crops following corn or soybeans. Also have a small CRP contract. But the chief, I think, really laid it out really well. The efforts of agriculture, the efforts of farmers, again, from that voluntary perspective, I think are really making a dent in some of the issues that you referred to.
And just quickly, I'm going to run out of time, but Mr. Lohr, in the soil health demonstration trial, what do you think are some of the most promising ways to develop tools to measure what's going on in the soil so that farmers can, have a outcome-based measurement?
That's a great question because, again, we have to be able to capture the work that's being done. I'll mention we also have, it's called the SEAP, the Conservation Effects Assessment Program. This is, again, a program we have across the country that partners with other agencies and entities to best try to measure ways and collect. And one of the emphasis through SEAP is how we can best track and collect that data. So.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
I now recognize the gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman, and I want to thank our guests for being here. It's my belief that our farmers and ranchers across this nation are the true conservationists because they depend on the land. The work day in and day out of caring for their land and ensuring its health and vitality, and they do this and they have for generations. USDA conservation programs also play an important role in these efforts. My constituents in Georgia's 12th District contact my office regularly asking for more information on the different programs available to them as they continue to seek more ways to enhance their current practices on their lands to not only improve cultivation, but to help conserve and provide for wildlife. This is for both of our guests this morning. What are the biggest obstacles agricultural producers face when they attempt to adopt new practices that have been encouraged on their land?
That's a great question, and I'll be brief. I was in North Dakota last week visiting with a farmer in the Red River Valley, and he was very progressive in his approaches, but he was trying things that were clearly outside the box where none of his neighbors were joining suit. And I asked him that very question: how can we get more farmers to implement good conservation? And it really takes by a farmer understanding the importance of soil health, being able to understand and then be that farmer that's in the community on the cutting edge, to be able to model for other farmers as well. Certainly cost is always an issue, but again, through our programs with the cost share monies, we provide opportunities, in some cases up to 100%, but clearly we try through our conservation programs, through our various partnerships, is to eliminate the cost as much as possible. So cost is one. Not having the proper information. Again, we have soil health scientists that are around the country that try to put on seminars and workshops and field days, partnering with extension agents and universities to try to get the word out so farmers understand the practices that are available and the programs that are available. So I think a combination of it's hard to break that cycle of it's never been done before and cover crops won't work or we can't use no-till conservation here, but we have to have soil health champions that are willing to be on the leading edge. We have to have our staff that's willing to be engaged to tell the story, and we have to rely on our partners, again, to show that these opportunities are out there.
Anything to add, Mr.
Yes, Congressman. I think I would echo what the chief said, but I think farmers in general are early adopters of technology. They're early adopters of conservation practices because there's that philosophical desire to do the right thing. And I would say that a lot of conversations that I've had long before I had this job was that there has to be patience. There has to be patience, and there has to be that network, as the chief referenced, whether it's federal agencies, land grant universities, and other partners that help us get conservation on the land and adopt those new technologies and those new practices. But a lot of times it's patience.
Do you see, as a follow-up, obviously we're here to listen today and to react to the needs of our constituents, and particularly in agriculture. What can we do as a body, as a House of Representatives, on both sides of the aisle to help you with these challenges? And that's for both of you.
Well, I think certainly you went a long way towards doing that with the passage of the Farm Bill. I think the conservation title was extremely generous, and we are, as an agency, along with FSA, are excited to get these rules and regulations written so we can streamline, that we can look at how we can better serve all of the facets of agriculture. So appreciate the support you guys have done. I think now having hearings like this are great, because hopefully this hearing will be picked up and the media will talk about the things that we've done, and hopefully there'll be folks out there around the country that will listen and understand and learn about maybe programs and agreements that are out there that they didn't know about.
So communication is key.
Absolutely, yes. Sir, absolutely.
Well, I think communication, absolutely,
Or education, educating our folks out there of what's available.
And I might just go one step further. I think there's a really good story to tell in agriculture, whether you're from Georgia or whether you're from Virginia or California or Maine. And the members telling that good story and talking about the good things that are happening in agriculture across this country can certainly help and go a long way too.
Thank you. It is a good story. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you. I thank the members for their questions, and we're going to proceed with a second round of questions for the members who remain here. And so I begin by recognizing myself for another 5 minutes. For both of the witnesses today, sometimes producers will have a main point of contact at either NRCS or FSA, and so they'll go to their regular agent with an issue, but it may be actually that their issue is covered by the other agency. I have heard personally from my constituents about cases of lapsed communication where a conservation issue that they could have gotten assistance for was actually not addressed because the agency they approached first didn't refer them, or the agency wasn't able to address their question. Could you both address how you will encourage communication between your field agents in the same region, and how the farm production and conservation reorganization will impact this issue?
Absolutely, and Madam Chairwoman, that's an excellent question, and it's something that the chief and I visit about a lot. We collaborate, not only the chief and I, but our staffs here in Washington. When the secretary had a vision of bringing together a new mission area that brought together the three agencies that are the most farmer-facing, so RMA, NRCS, and FSA, to come together as one mission area and really work hard on collaboration and put a focus on if we're going to provide exceptional customer service to our farmers, ranchers, and forest stewards across this country, those three agencies have got to be lockstep and working together. And so I think that message comes from the top, and the chief and I certainly promote that and talk about that. And we've got, NRCS has state conservationists. We have state executive directors that are carrying that message as well about collaboration and working together. I know our secretary would not be very happy to hear that a producer went into an office and did not experience exceptional customer service. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that happens. And I think with bringing the agencies together under one missionary, I believe in my mind that it's happening. But we've got some work to do, maybe in some parts of the country, to do a better job.
I can comment again, if that's okay. So we have roughly about 2,000 shared offices across the country between FSA and NRCS. And again, the goal for us is for a farmer to walk in the door who has an issue, and the staff works back and forth both ways to direct them in the proper direction, whether they need FSA help or NRCS help as well. So as the administrator said, our vision is certainly to have that collaboration throughout the country. And again, if there are individual situations and offices where there isn't that collaboration, certainly we want to make sure that the area leaders and the state leaders know that we can address that, because that is not the vision that we are trying to set from here in Washington. Thank you.
I appreciate your work on that, and I hope that where possible, we as members of this committee or members of Congress can ensure that our constituents understand where they can best go for services, and I thank you for your commitment to serving individual producers. For a second question, it's about the EQIP program. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, is widely used by farmers and ranchers in my district. And Chief Lohr, the most recent agricultural census revealed some bright spots for conservation. More farms are implementing conservation practices, reduced tillage practices increased by 21%, and land planted with cover crops increased by over 15 million acres. This is very good news in the areas I represent in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. The 2018 Farm Bill does offer increased payment rates for cover crop resource conserving crop rotation and rotational grazing. And what plans are in store for the department to promote these practices to farmers and producers?
And I appreciate your in-depth knowledge of what EQIP does, so it's great to hear that you understand the program and you support it. So as I said earlier, we're in the process now of formulating the rules and regulations that we'll be rolling out later this year, and I think it's going to be exciting for farmers to actually see what's going to be available. Our job is to communicate and educate the best that we can, starting here in D.C. with our public affairs team to administer press releases, and working individually with our state offices all the way through to our district offices across the country. So I can assure you that once we have new programs and exciting changes, we will do our best to make sure that we are being able to get the word out, starting with our state conservationists, filtered all the way down to our district offices, through social media, through press releases, through partnering with other entities and partners that they can help spread the word as well. So again, this is good news. We're excited to have the opportunity, but it doesn't do any good if our producers are unaware of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Ranking Member LaMalfa for 5 minutes.
Thank you again, Chair Spanberger. Back to Chief Lohr on the question I alluded to in the beginning. Again, we have a situation where we're importing a tremendous amount of timber and lumber products to this country, and we have all this inventory, especially in the western states, that is burning up, or at least causing a hazardous situation and causing more harm to, the density of the forest is causing harm to it itself, because if we're having a drought situation, then, you can see that you're not going to have a winning combination there. Trees starving for limited water supply. So what we need, in my view, and I want to see what your thoughts are on how we can develop more of the markets for the wood products that come domestically, help these family landowners and on public lands to feed the manufacturing and the biomass, which I think we need a lot more of on the green energy side of it. How can NRCS be helping? NRCS be working with more local markets, more domestic markets for utilizing, whether it's biomass for energy or the lumber, the timber that we still need in this country, and utilize more of what we grow domestically for our own communities and our own economy and our own fire safety, for wildfire mitigation, et cetera. So how can we kick that up significantly is what we're facing.
Well, I appreciate your question. It's certainly a good one. I will say, I think the answer comes back to being able to look at partnerships. Obviously, we're in the conservation business, so our job is to work with the individual landowners to have the best conservation practices on their operation that they can manage their forest. When it gets into the marketing of products, that's a little bit out of our wheelhouse, but within USDA, there are other agencies that focus on that. I would say the Ag Marketing Service, for example. Certainly, if there's a need that you can bring to us, we could certainly reach out to other agencies to try to begin a dialogue and kind of let them know the issues that we've heard and see if there's some communications that can take place. But again,
Yeah, certainly underlining domestically grown, domestically harvested
Yes.
as an offset for the inventory and the wildfire risk that it's just making for us, so I'll stop.
well, I appreciate you bringing the issue to us, and we'll be happy to follow back up with you for more details, and maybe our team can try to help get you pointed in the right direction with an agency that might be able to take the lead in that, but we'll certainly be able to follow back up.
Yeah, I know the Secretary's taking great interest in that as well. For both of you on the panel here as well, you know, again, a lot of discussion about climate policy, maybe as regards the Green New Deal. That's a bit of a moving target, but however we're going to specify this, there's a lot of concerns that some of these ideas of this policy would be pretty negatively impactful to farmers who I find by and large are the best stewards of the land that's in use and always on the cutting edge of trying to utilize better practices. You know, discussions about dictating land use and maybe, you know, less and less beef or meat in our diets. Coming back to voluntary success, incentive-based success, can you speak to the success of how that relates to carbon sequestration and the wins we're having there when it's done integral with, again, voluntary activities or innovation that happens on the farm? Because what I find is that so many of the ideas do come from a local innovation.
Well, I could speak from FSA's perspective and CRP and the carbon sequestration that takes place on the 22.5 million acres of CRP, and we mentioned that earlier of an estimated 34 million metric tons. But I think what's interesting, that I've found to be interesting since becoming the administrator, is the amount of analysis that we do that supports or gives us information on the programs that we do. We have a group within the Business Center at FPAC that does analysis, environmental analysis, economic analysis of the programs that we do. Again, voluntary programs from a producer's perspective that are communicated out, and we have access. We have access to those things that can really tell a story, tell the tale of what are we accomplishing. Certainly, I couldn't speak to those because they can get pretty technical, but we are measuring from the things that we do as an agency. But I know that other voluntary efforts that go beyond the things that NRCS or the things that FSA do are also there are better ways to measure success. And so the more that we know, the more that we can document, and the more that we can prove, I think goes a long way to telling the story about voluntary conservation.
Thank you. I yield back.
I now recognize the gentlewoman from Florida. Oh, I'm sorry, from Maine.
A lot of Mainers go to Florida in the winter, but and we want them to come back now. It's summer. Well, thank you, and I just want to thank Mr. Lamalfa for that question, because again, I think that's part of what I was trying to get at before. You know, the first thing people say when they're talking about climate change is, oh, you'll never have a hamburger again, or kind of put this fear in and talk about the problems that they see farmers creating. And I really appreciate the work that's being done, you know, to help people understand the important role that farmers play in carbon sequestration. And appreciate you mentioning the SEEP program to me. I wasn't that familiar with it, so I'll do a little work understanding that. But I think there are a lot of ways that the USDA can be helpful, frankly, in helping people to understand just, you know, what the myths and what the truths are, and the work you're already doing that's really extensive to help farmers sequester carbon. And I think the sooner that farmers can participate in a carbon market, which could potentially be an extra source of income for them, which I think no farmer is going to say no to, it'll be really helpful. So again, thank you for that, and I'll look forward to continuing to talk with you about that so we can kind of get people into the reality of what farmers do. But I really do think there's a big role for the USDA to play in promoting what you're already doing, in a sense, and helping people understand this climate debate in a different way and putting farmers in a different light. I wanted to ask you about a different program. I'm really interested in the Agriculture Conservation Easement Program, and I'm really glad to see robust funding for that. I'd just like you to hear you talk a little bit about the importance of it. I think, Administrator Laura, you maybe have it on your farm, so you probably have some personal experience. I know it's just, these easements have been really important in our state, and can you talk about their importance and what we can do with increased funding?
I warn you, I get excited when I talk about easements. I don't want to use
That's
up the whole
good, you
time.
just go right ahead.
But yes, so at our farm, we placed permanent conservation easements 2 years ago. I have 6 children, and it's important to me as a fifth-generation farmer that that land can stay in ag production forever. Our ACEP program really has 2 components, the AO, which is the ag land component, and WRE, which is the wetland reserve component. So it allows some flexibility no matter where you are across the country or what your ultimate goal is, to be able to make sure that land can be, the development rights can be taken away in the AO example, and that land will have to stay in an agricultural use forever. The beauty of it is we have partners. So there are land trusts and agencies around the country that partner with us, that provide cash matches and assistance that actually will hold the easements. And basically a farmer then will be compensated for the value of that development that they forego, and then they're able to enhance the land, take that money and improve the operations. There have been so many success stories of farms that were able to take the money that they received from those development rights and invest it back into the business to add an ice cream operation or some neat things like that to ensure that viability for the next generation. So ACEP is one of my favorite programs to talk about. And then on the wetland side, I was just in North and South Dakota last week and got to see land that's very environmentally sensitive. It doesn't make good environmental sense for farmers to try to farm this area when it's flooding every 3rd year. There's a lot of erosion efforts that are being neglected. So the WRE allows them to basically, whether it's for 30 years or for a permanent easement, that land is taken out of production, restored back to the original wetlands, and habitat flourishes, native grasses flourish. It can really be a wonderful example of how the land was supposed to be. So I think that the ACEP program accomplishes both of those missions with our working lands and with our wetlands. I'm a proud supporter and proud to say that we have permanent easements placed on our farm forever. So thank you for the question.
No, that's great. You know, I think another important component of it that people don't often recognize that's part of this climate change debate is that we're losing farmland quickly, and I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's like acres per hour. It's so much. But what people often don't calculate is that every time you lose an acre of farmland, you're very likely increasing, you know, the climate change issue, the carbon in our atmosphere, because if it's turned over to development, there's a very good chance that's, you know, more homes, more cars, more concrete, and less land to sequester the carbon. So it just exacerbates the cycle. Very quickly, I'm almost out of time, but you wanted to say anything good about the climate hubs? We just visited with the University of Maine, our land-grant college, and they're just really excited about the relationship they have with one of the 10 climate hubs. And there's a little bit of decreased funding. I'm on the Ag Approps Committee, so we're anxious to keep that funding there, but it's kind of an accumulation of different agency funding. Can you talk about their importance as we move forward in this discussion?
Absolutely. Well, there are 10 climate hubs around the country, and they provide amazing data collection. Exactly. We need to study what's happening with the environment, the impacts that the work that we are doing have on the impact. And again, it captures that information so we can make wise and informed decisions. So I think the climate hubs that USDA has are very important, and I'm sure there are many that would appreciate increased funding for them. So thank you.
That's good. Thank you. Yield back. Thank you, Madam.
I now recognize the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you again, Chairwoman, for continuing this important conversation we're having. You know, as far as USDA conservation, we have partnerships with, and they provide a voluntary incentive-based way for a private landowner, farmer, or rancher to enhance these conservation practices. Some programs require partnerships with wildlife groups or land trusts to help foster these projects and conservation efforts on their lands. For those not familiar with this committee, can you provide an example of how these partnerships work and how they ultimately benefit the land, the water, and wildlife habitats?
I'll be quick. I don't want to take the administrator's thunder. So again, another one of the neat projects that we do. There's several. Working Lands for Wildlife is one, the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, another one. I'll just mention briefly, a couple weeks ago, I was down in the Panhandle of Florida near Pensacola, and through RCPP and HFRP, they had an agreement with 4,000 acres through the Healthy Forest Reserve Program, where they were able to partner with various groups and agencies, Fish and Wildlife, where they placed permanent conservations on almost 4,000 acres of land. They were able to put plans together to market and to make sure those forest lands are managed through the Longleaf Pine Initiative. Very exciting stuff. They bring in the economic aspect, but the really cool part about these programs is the habitat component that you mentioned. The gopher tortoise is a threatened species in that part of the world, and they were able to partner with Fish and Wildlife to put habitat plots throughout the property to increase the opportunity for the gopher tortoise to thrive. So that's just one example where it takes many different agencies, partners to come together to accomplish a lot of missions, but that species component and the habitat component is really a neat addition. Again, Working Lands for Wildlife is a similar program as well that combines lots of different partners together, accomplishing good things at the end. Thanks.
I would just mention, Congressman, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, and previous to the 2018 Farm Bill, that the partners in the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program were states. New language in the new Farm Bill allows for partners to be NGOs, for example, to be able to help offset the producer's costs, in some cases contribute to those to the payment to the producer. But the fact that we're able to open that up to other partners, I think, is going to be meaningful. So in my mind, when we open that up to other partners, we've talked a lot this morning about outreach and communication, and the more folks that we have that are participating from a contribution standpoint, they're going to help get the word out as well, and not only get the word out about it's available to sign up, but also get the word out about the accomplishments that those practices are doing. So we're very excited about entering into those new agreements with folks just other than states.
How about on our federally owned forest lands where we're having problems with management? Are we making any efforts to deal with that issue? I know that the Farm Bill did address some of those issues, but there's just big debate about, okay, how do you manage it properly from an environmental standpoint? Have you addressed any of that?
Yes, sir. So obviously, public lands typically fall under the space of the U.S. Forest Service, but I will say that we do look for ways that we can continue to collaborate and partner. And one of the programs that we do is called the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Initiative. There are two chiefs within USDA, the Forest Service and NRCS, and this idea was born about 7 years ago, where both agencies are able to put money together. There's a ranking and an application process that we could look at large-scale projects that involve both public and private lands together, looking at how we can restore lands, we can, again, embrace wildlife habitat, and really bring projects together that do encompass those public lands that you mentioned to have a more positive environmental effort. So, again, we're always looking for ways to partner. Most public land restoration work, again, with the Forest Service, but we certainly want to look for those opportunities of collaboration.
Okay. Well, I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thanks.
Thank you. Before we adjourn today, I invite the ranking member to make any closing remarks that he may have.
Could it be like on Jeopardy in the form of a question?
It may be.
Thank you. Just one last one for the panel. I do appreciate your time and your follow-up that you'll be providing for the members of this committee today. Again, to Chair Spanberger for making this happen today. Coming back under EQIP, what the Farm Bill created a new authority known as Conservation Incentive Payments. We talked about simplified contracting authority. So many inquiries come in from our constituents about how this can be made to work and how they can also provide greater input on shaping these programs locally as region by region things are different, crop by crop, et cetera. Can you give us any guidance, just real quickly? I don't want to, take the whole 5 here, but on how to best have local-led input as tailored to local producers, et cetera.
Thank you for your question. And the beauty of NRCS is we are locally led. That's been our motto and our theme for almost 85 years because all conservation begins at the local level. These conservation incentive payments is a new feature that will be rolling out in 2020, but I would certainly encourage the producers who have an interest to get involved with the local work group. Every district office of NRCS has a local work group that meet, they shape policy that gets pushed up to the state technical committee. And as you mentioned perfectly, agriculture is so different, not only state to state, but locality to locality. So this is an opportunity for farmers to get involved with that local level and kind of share what's needed. What are the types of things that would make them be a more efficient and more effective farmer, and then allow that information then to proceed up to the state technical committee to make those decisions on how best to implement those features. So thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you. I like to get as much as I can out of a panel when I've got you here, so thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. I want to thank our witnesses again today for their time. This conversation is essential as we increase collaboration between the USDA, Republicans and Democrats in Congress, and farmers across our districts and our country. Above all, I'm interested in exploring and expanding upon what works, and I believe we have started down that path today. We've had great conversations about carbon sequestration, identifying air farms, biomass for energy, domestic timber consumption, easements, and climate hubs, and the value of really data-driven discussions and decisions. And the programs we've been discussing today encourage farmers and landowners to pursue even more innovative ways of conserving our natural resources. All at once, we can make our production more economically viable and more sustainable, all while hearing directly from crop and livestock producers about their concerns. I thank Congressman LaMalfa, I thank all the members of the committee for being here today, and to the witnesses, thank you so much for your time and for your engagement. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member. The hearing of the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry is now adjourned.